also doing an online chat on Blue Sky. The purpose of the call is to talk about the childcare crisis and highlight what is happening in states. Polling conducted by GQR Research at the end of 2023 showed us that 73% of all voters of all political persuasions support the type of childcare system that we're all trying to build, specifically a childcare system that is government-funded, universal childcare that guarantees every family free and easy to access options to meet their needs, including care during nights and weekends and care provided in the languages that the families speak at home. The bottom line is every child deserves access to childcare that is affordable, accessible, and responsive to their needs. Childcare is part of our essential infrastructure, just like roads, bridges, public schools, healthcare, libraries. And everyone should have access to care that meets their and their family's unique needs. The truth of the matter is that our childcare educators are the workforce behind the workforce. We can't go to work if we don't have reliable systems and places where we can take our kids. And childcare educators should be receiving good wages and benefits that allow them to care for their families in the same way that they care for other people's families. Unfortunately, in America, childcare is viewed as a personal problem that families alone must solve. Our childcare system is broken and in need of repair. I'm excited to have a conversation tonight with parents, childcare educators, and also organizers. Tonight, I'll speak with Celeste Finn, and she's a leader with Kids Count on Us. She's also the executive director of Big Wonder Childcare in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'll also speak with Destiny Bolton. She's an organizer with Spaces in Action. Liliana Camacho, and Liliana is a Santa Clara organizer with Parent Voices. Alexis Primo, she's a San Diego organizer with Parent Voices. Crystal Parrott, and Crystal is the director of childcare services for the YWCA of Central Maine. Brianna Edwards, she's a childcare provider and a leader with AQE New York. Enosha Reffin, she's a community organizer also with AQE New York. And also Erin Clark. Erin is a community organizer with 9 to 5 Georgia. As each person speaks, their name will appear underneath their remarks. So if you're curious or if you forget who's speaking, you should see their name right there. So I'm going to ask a few questions. And when I ask the questions, any of our panelists should feel free to weigh in and respond. So the first question is, there is a childcare crisis in the United States. And I'd like to know from your perspective, what issues are contributing to the childcare crisis? Anyone should feel free to jump in.
Start?
Anyone should feel free to jump in.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. The first question again is there's a childcare crisis in the United States. In your perspective, what is contributing to the crisis? Anyone can jump in and respond to that question.
In my opinion, I feel like it also has to do with how much, especially in California, our rent is really high and our parents don't have childcare for our kids, especially like in my position. I'm a mom of 4. And I had to quit my job after my 4th baby being born because rent was too expensive and childcare was too expensive.
So if you were in a position where you had to quit your job, I'm sure that financially that had to have an impact. Is that right?
It did. We were living in a wage, just one was bringing in the income, and we were limiting to just making sure we paid rent and that we had food for our children. And also that brought a lot of stress to both my partner and I, and the kids could also feel that. And it also brought them, like, I guess, emotionally disturbance in a way that they were sad because, and like as a parent, it feels terrible having to tell your child, like, no, we can't do that because we can't afford it, It got to moments where we had to share that with the kids on why we couldn't do certain things.
And just one more question for you, Liliana. When you think about the childcare crisis, what do you feel is contributing to the crisis?
a lot of people don't feel childcare is important, especially when for Parent Voices, we do a lot of advocacy with our legislators. And I feel that sometimes childcare is not seen as important as other topics. I just for myself, again, it took me 3 years to get off a waiting list, and people don't realize that there's a much bigger waiting list for childcare than they think.
Great. And would any of our other speakers want to weigh into this question of what do you feel is contributing to the childcare crisis in the United States?
I would like to
Yeah.
weigh in. This is Destiny from Spaces. I would say the low amount of funding that is given to early child care education is also a big crisis that contributes to it. We have individuals that don't want to work in the field anymore because they're not being paid adequate wages. I can't speak for everywhere, but I do know in Washington, D.C., early child care educators are being paid the minimum wage, and that is simply not enough to live and maintain a household. And individuals are leaving the field and they're going to public schools because they have the background and the education in order to move to those particular positions. And they do that because they feel like they're not being invested in. I would also like to say that there's also an environmental health crisis as well, with just the upkeep on certain facilities in reference to the districts that individuals are in. Let's say, for instance, lead pipes. And also in reference to, I believe it was Liliana that just spoke about being on the waiting list. So I want to bring up child care subsidy. Child care subsidy is underfunded as well. And it's not, I would say, rationalized in reference to who is able to get what kind of services. It's not as accessible in the program. The application to enter the program is a long and tedious process. And finding adequate childcare near to your home where it's a convenience for you and your child can be difficult. So I would say that those are some things that go into the childcare crisis.
And when you say child care subsidy, you mean for families to be able to access care. Is that right?
Yes.
How do you think child care subsidies, like how do you think that whole program is going to be, how is that impacting families? Like I would imagine that if you're not eligible for a subsidy, but you're not making enough to afford the full range of care, that you could have problems. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to that.
Yes. I hear about all the time with parents as an organizer, not being able to get certain job positions that they apply for. They have positions lined up, interviews to go to, and it just doesn't work out because they aren't able to find adequate childcare. So it most definitely affects them on the employment and financial standpoint. And it comes to just dependability of the support systems that they already have within their family, which that also creates an additional burden because, the rent is very high. Inflation is going up for everything. So I would say most definitely it's a hindrance for them to be able to find and keep jobs with the instability within childcare.
And Destiny, just another question for you. How does this feel to you as an organizer, watching families struggle to navigate and afford care, but also watching good child care educators, people who are passionate about the work? How does it feel to you watching them struggle to earn a wage that allows them to even care for their own basic needs? How does that feel to you?
Yes, it feels heartbreaking. Being a young lady that grew up in early childcare education, um, most definitely feeling it from the parent standpoint of knowing that quality childcare is needed. The developmental years for children are very important, and birth to 3 is very important. Um, and it's all about the connection. It's not necessarily just babysitting. It's the social and emotional skills and the safety that the child is able to feel when they're with these providers. And just parents not being able or having a struggle to be able to meet their need is devastating, especially in DC. I believe it's known as one of the most expensive cities in the United States. It's very devastating. And also from a provider and educator standpoint, you know, them knowing their job, knowing how to do it adequately, um, being the workforce behind the workforce, being the reason why individuals are able to go to work, and them not getting that compensation and recognition for their work is heartbreaking. Every single year we have to fight for funding. We have to tell the Mayor Bowser, why it's important to give courage and give hope and give a livelihood to educators, and it's discouraging for them. It makes them feel like there will never be any resolution.
Thank you for that. Um, just one more question before we go to another speaker. DC had like in, I believe it was a pay stabilization or a pay equity fund that Spaces in Action was pretty instrumental in ensuring. What did that fund do?
Yes, the Pay Equity Fund was able to give providers, educators, more pay in reference to what they were already getting paid. So as stated before, they make a minimum wage. The Pay Equity Fund at first was distributed into their own bank account. So pretty much of a portion was given to them. I can't really give the accurate amount right now, but moving forward now it goes along a credential ladder. So individuals are able to make more in reference to what their educational level is. Like for instance, a bachelor's degree would make more than an associate's. But they also give teachers the ability to go and strengthen their education and get higher degrees. And what that funding does is enable them to have that extra pocket money to be able to do the things that they need to do in order to live in this society. Heard multiple stories within the last budget hearings that we've done. We collect testimonies throughout the year of how influential it's been, from buying cars to buying houses to being able to send their kids to school, being able to pay off certain loans and certain debts that they had within their family. Um, it was one teacher where she actually had explained to us that she was able to pay for her headstone for her child that had passed away. So it really went deep into just the need that early learning educators needed in reference to this funding source. And it's very important that we protect it. Mayor Bowser, she was trying to cut it last year. And it's devastating to have something granted to you that is creating regulation in your life. And it's something that should be set at the forefront of being invested in, because when you invest in the early learning educators, you invest in the children as well for our future, and they need to be invested in.
Thank you so much. And I wonder if any of our other speakers would want to come to the stage, the virtual stage, and say a word or two about what, from your perspective, is causing the childcare crisis. And you could speak from, what's happening in your state.
Hi. I can kind of speak from both sides, as in a parent and a provider, because I've been both. Originally, what made me go into doing daycare is because I was a parent looking for daycare. The lists were like extremely long, and it just wasn't affordable. Um, as to like piggyback off of what Destiny was saying with the subsidy, um they've raised the limits a little bit, but when I originally went looking for subsidy, I was only working part-time and making minimum wage, but they said that I was like $40 over the limit to be able to receive the subsidy, so it was kind of discouraging. And then on the provider side with subsidy, it's kind of discouraging to want to accept subsidy, because a lot of the times it's minimum wage that they're paying you, and sometimes below minimum wage. And they take a full month in order to pay you. So like if someone started today, you would have to wait a full month of them coming, and then you would get paid the following month. So if you only had that one subsidy person, your bills would pretty much have to wait in order to even like pay anything. So it kind of like discourages you to even want to accept subsidy, which I still did. I didn't like discriminate against anyone. I did it. I had some of both, but just things like that definitely. I know I have friends who were doing childcare and they changed their mind because the process took too long with the parent getting set up, then waiting to be paid, and then like if there's a paper missing, they make you wait even longer. So I just think that the process of it all is not really realistic when you have to pay bills.
And waiting 30 days to be compensated, if you're a small business, you feel that immediately. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
And they were like pushing to open a daycare center, which I was in the process of doing. But when you they gave grants, I believe it was called like the desert grant. Originally they said that the grants were going to be like tax free. It's to help everyone during like the COVID times. And it was a huge help. It was depending on the size of and how many kids you had. It ranged from like 30,000 to 40, and they split it up over like 6 7 months. Once that was dispersed, a year later they changed it. Well, at the end of the year they changed it to being taxed. So it started out as a grant, and then we ended up having to report it as tax, and that also discouraged people because now that was something some people may not have taken out, and they were using it to open a daycare center, but the cost for the daycare center pretty much skyrocketed after COVID, and that also would raise the weekly rates for parents, which we didn't really want to do that, but obviously you have to like accommodate for different things, and it's just hard.
What does it feel like to you? And I'm speaking right now with Brianna Edwards from the Alliance for Quality Education, New York. I know you have a colleague on, but what does it feel like to you? Because you've been on both sides. You've been the parent needing service. You've also been on the child care provider side. What does it feel like to you to want to be able to provide care and to be kind of stuck in this system of where like your hands are tied almost?
It's very frustrating because I had a lot of parents who actually became like family, and I know if I closed, then they would be struggling even more than being able to pay me. So sometimes I did take pay cuts, and then obviously that trickled down to like affect my own family. But I just felt so bad, especially since my waiting list was like 2 pages long. The I feel like the hours aren't really accommodating as many people that need it, but then it also is like you have to decide if you want to work that long and not get paid what you believe you should be paid. So it's kind of like you said, like your hands are tied, and sometimes you have to decide if you want to take the pay cut or take a new route in like what you want to do for a living.
I wonder if anyone else wants to speak to this question of what do you feel like is contributing to the childcare crisis in your state? Anyone else want to weigh in here?
I would like to also add something, but I would like to give the chance to somebody else if anyone else wants to talk.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm Alexis Primo. I'm with Parent Voices. I'm the organizer for the San Diego chapter. And I just wanted to add the fact that it is important for home in-home childcare, licensed in-home childcare providers to be recognized. I had an in-home childcare. I was licensed for 5 years prior to COVID. And when COVID happened, it was very difficult for parents to afford childcare. And being able to provide subsidized childcare was difficult based on the reimbursement. And being able to take care of my family and maintain the childcare, it was difficult to provide as much assistance as I would love to parents. So for me, a lot of grants went out to childcare, but I think the smaller in-home childcare providers were overlooked. And if they received grants and help so that they could maintain their facilities like me, then I think that would have created more room for children to be able to be taken care of, especially at those younger ages, because the childcare facilities, most of them don't take care of infants. The in-home childcares are smaller, but I don't think they're recognized and they receive adequate support.
You know, as you're speaking, Alexis, it makes me think that we need a variety of different childcare options. Like we need childcare facilities and home-based centers that are open on the weekends, that are open late. But can you speak to why it's important to have a variety of different options in terms of childcare?
Yes, definitely. There are, well, especially when COVID happened, there were first responders, there are the doctors, there are the firefighters. There are a lot of jobs that are not within the window of the 9 to 5, the standard work hours. They're students. And me being a student, it has been difficult until my children started school. I ended up having to close the daycare because I couldn't financially contribute to supporting my family. And I went to school. Now, when I got accepted, I finished up my associates. I got 3 associate's degrees in psychology, social work, and Black studies. And I got accepted into San Diego State University. I was excited. I got a job as well during the summer, but I had no childcare. So I think for students and for persons that are employed during what's it called? The the not so regular hours,
Yeah, like second shift or third shift.
Yes, yes. And those parents that need flexibility, I think it's important for us to take that into consideration and have those options available.
Thank you so much. I see Celeste Finn. Celeste is with Kids Count on Us. Celeste, is there anything that you want to share in terms of what you see, what's happening in Minnesota, but also from your years of experience of what contributes to the childcare crisis?
Yeah, I love everything that folks have said so far. I recently opened my own nonprofit childcare in St. Paul, Minnesota, but I've worked around the country and around the world in early ed spaces. And something that I think is critical whenever you're talking about the crisis, there's 2 components in my mind. One is the infrastructure of childcare. What policies and funding needs to be in place to make it so that childcare can help communities, help cities, help the economy thrive and operate, right? We really are the workers behind the workers. And it's also essential for childcare to be available for gender equity, wealth mobility, in order to undo a lot of systemic oppressions that are common in our communities across the United States. So there's the infrastructure question, and then there's the culture question. And I think the culture question is just as important. And when I say culture, I mean early childhood education and care is a lot more than babysitting. And I think we lack the respect and the professionalism it requires to take care of groups of young children for the majority of the day, right? So babysitter who is inadequate and maybe a little bit negligent for 2 hours a week isn't going to cause cognitive harm or emotional harm to a child. Early childhood educator who is not fully present and attuned to the needs of children for 8 hours a day will cause harm and will minimize the potential of a child, knowing that 90% of the brain is developed by the time they're 5. And so as in communities and across the United States, we really need to think about how we are viewing the culture around childcare and our philosophy around raising and taking care of young children. And until we really get that right and with the respect that it needs, neither the infrastructure or the culture of early childhood and care is going to be where it needs to be.
Part of this sounds like a narrative issue, you know, like it sounds like a narrative issue, but it also sounds like there's a lot of misconceptions about what we say when we mean early childhood education and care. You mentioned in your remarks that, you know, what child care educators are doing, it's not babysitting. Can you describe like what happens and the different needs that, you know, social, emotional, all that child care educators are providing?
I mean, it's really extremely robust. What the core competencies that an early childhood educator needs to have is very robust, and it's something that it is a narrative. It is a conversation we need to have a lot more with our legislators and also with their families, so that they can respect the work we do. I mean, obviously, having really strong executive functioning skills as the adult in the room, the amount of patience, problem solving, prioritizing of tasks, remembering the minutia of whose lunchbox is what and who has allergies and who has intolerances is it's like your every classroom is like its own ship, and it needs to run very smoothly to take care of all the kids and all their needs for a whole day. Of the parts of a child's development from 0 to 5, and every 3 months it's going to look different. So curriculum planning and assessment are huge parts of the job. Cultural competency and understanding and partnering with families wherever they're at is also a huge part of the job. So being very good at communicating and conflict resolution and building community is all a part of what an early childhood educator needs to do. And for example, this morning I had to talk to a parent and some teachers about if they talk to their pediatrician, because they might need OT training, talking with specialists and learning about language delays. These are all a part of my day-to-day activities. And they're absolutely essential for the well-being of kids and to make sure they're ready for kindergarten for their ABCs and their literacy, but also in their ability to solve problems, have a positive regard for self, and to make friendships.
Thank you. Anyone else want to respond to this question before I move on to the next question?
I did. I'm here in Mountain View, California, and the city that I live in has no centers that actually take subsidy due to the fact that they are like, I can't remember who it was, but she mentioned it. They're not receiving their payments on time. And also the child care providers are not getting paid enough. That's something that we have heard from those that did accept a voucher in the past. So I want to make sure that we make it clear, like it is a big crisis. Just even alone here in my city, Mountain View, we don't have centers. I just spoke to a mom today that was trying to figure out where she can find childcare for her child that's 6 months old, and she was explaining like even her living situation is they're both working part-times, right, so that they can have some type of income, but it's not enough because at the end of the day it's just one income for a household of 7.
So if a family lives in that kind of region where, you know, there are no child care centers that accept subsidies or that can serve their family, what do they do?
So for her, like she was explaining in her situation, her and her husband have to take turns right now. One takes like an AM shift at his job, and then she takes the PM shift, and that's how they're managing to also not only take care of the baby, but also to have to take care of the other 5 children that they have, 6 children or 5 children that they have. And that's how she's doing it, and that's how I also started off, you know. So I could definitely relate what she was going through, because I wasn't finding a place for my kids to go to, and it was like under 3 at the time for me. So just hearing her story again and saying like, I have looked for centers, you know, and I'm not finding anything, can you guys like help me? And I was like, yeah, we use a web where we have parents look up like what centers are close to you, and then there you can like narrow your search to, do they accept vouchers or subsidies, do they have space? And a lot of the centers that are in Mountain View, it's not even about whether or not they take subsidies vouchers, it's also that they don't have spacing for kids right now.
Mommy.
Wow. So I want to read something to you and to our other speakers, and I just want you to tell me if this surprises you. So towards the end of 2024, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, he issued an advisory on parental stress and how parental stress was contributing to mental health challenges of parents. According to the data, which was from 2023, 33% of parents reported high levels of stress in the past month, compared to 20% of other adults. 48% of parents say that most days their stress is completely overwhelming, compared to 26% among other adults. Parents and caregivers experience a multitude of unique stressors from raising children. This includes financial strain, economic instability, poverty, time demand, children's safety and health, parental isolation and loneliness. You know, childcare is on the list. And so I'm wondering, as you hear like that kind of parental advisory from the U.S. Surgeon General, is this surprising to any of you?
Absolutely not.
It's not. I was going to say it's not surprising to me whatsoever. You know, as a center director here in Lewiston, Maine, I am a mom to 110 kids every day, even though they're not mine, and I worry about them and my children, personal children. I would assume the number would be higher just because of all the stressors that come with trying to be that person who is a caregiver for them all. It does not surprise me whatsoever.
Thank you, Crystal. And Nosha, I want to bring you into the conversation. When you hear those statistics, does that surprise you?
No, absolutely not. I am a single mother of 6 children, and a lot of my stress came from the fact of my children, like in regards to like, you know, putting them in childcare, and also having to leave them sometimes when I didn't have a vehicle to access centers. The stress of like if they're being taken care of correctly. Also the stress of either picking between nurturing them or providing a roof over their head. That choice is just it just really increases mom guilt. Is the best word I can say for it.
And
mom and teacher guilt, I'm going to say, because I can even see myself.
Let me just go back for a second, because I wanted to just ask a follow-up question to Anosha. So Anosha, when you consider all this and you think about what contributes to the child care crisis, or even the strain that you've experienced, is there anything else that you would add other than what's been said earlier? Anything else that you would add? Anosha?
I know, I think they covered a lot, but I think especially the accessibility for childcare part is like really huge, because like I said, I had to settle for in-home providers or neighborhood providers, which I typically didn't know. But again, the stress of having to pick in between providing for them or nurturing them, I had no choice but to. I felt like I had no choice but to leave them with folks and in good faith. But yeah, I think a lot of parents don't have vehicles. They don't have the money to afford childcare. And sometimes, like even when I was in college, I almost had to drop out due to the fact that I dropped below the hourly eligibility requirement in order for you to be a full-time student. And so I had to drop down to part-time, in which it took away my subsidies. And so I think the care center that my kids were going to, they had a grant for first-time graduates or generation graduates, which I was eligible for. So that saved me from having to drop out. But I think the accessibility piece is huge, especially for parents who don't have any other support system either, because I didn't. It was just me.
Yeah. You know, when you talk about parents who, you know, may not have a car or don't have reliable transportation, I remember when I started my career, I did not have a car, and I took the bus to get to work. Fortunately, my mother knew someone and she was willing to babysit my son. But what that involved was she came to my house to pick up my son. And then when I was close to home, I would call her and she would bring my son back to me. And I just don't know how I would have made, she was a home-based provider, but I don't know how I would have made it in those early years when you're really trying to start your career without that kind of support. And you can't get that every place. So I just wanted to echo and to share that experience. Crystal, you were trying to add something to the conversation. Can we have you come back to the stage to finish that thought?
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of piggybacking off with the mom guilt. There's also teacher guilt that comes into play as well. I've been in a center for almost 20 years and I'm a mom of 3, and I have an extreme amount of guilt when I need to be out because my kids are sick and then I worry about the children in my classroom. It follows me that way. Or at the same time, when I have to feel like I need to choose between, you know, do I go to school and have someone else watch my personal children because, you know, we don't have someone to cover my classroom? So it kind of like piggybacks all of it from this crisis standpoint that we're seeing. I don't think it's one thing in particular. I think it's a whole group of things that is finally kind of coming together and making the cracks of childcare even larger. I think COVID really kind of kicked into high gear how fragile the system that we have set in place. And I don't think it's going to get fixed until it kind of works from the, you know, government down, which, you know, we've seen great improvements here in Maine. We've got, you know, some great grant programs available for teachers to get a little extra from a monetary value, you know. So I think we're moving in that right direction. It's just not moving quick enough.
So, you know, that first question, we spent some time there. As we think about winding down this conversation, my question for you is this. If you had a captive audience with the governor of your state, if you were sitting down with elected officials in your state and they were saying, what is the solution? Or what do you want us to know? What might you all share? And anyone can start us off.
Hi, this is Erin with 9 to 5 Georgia. And if we were to sit down with the governor of our state, I think we would highlight where part of this crisis is stemming from, that it is stemming from a long history of undervaluing and underfunding childcare. And in order to really address this crisis, we need to invest in our childcare system, and we need to commit to long-term sustainable funding. So in the state of Georgia, we have an $11 billion undesignated surplus. And our state leaders have an incredible opportunity to invest a portion of this undesignated surplus to establish a childcare trust fund. And this is something that has been written about extensively by the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute with breakdowns of how this funding can be used for years to come to support our early childhood education system. Georgia leaders love to say that Georgia is the best state to do business, but we need to make sure that it is the best state for workers so that they can continue to show up to work. And in order for that to happen, we need to fully invest in our childcare system, and we need to make it long-term funding so that we are not coming back year after year to ask for general allocations that will benefit providers and parents for a short time, but will not successfully stabilize the childcare system in the way that this long-term funding would.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Erin. Who's next? what message would you give to the governor of your state, or if you were sitting down with elected officials in your state, what message would you give to them about things that they could do to solve or address the child care crisis?
I can jump in.
I would say, oh, sorry.
No, you can share.
Yeah, Eniza Ruffin, AQE. If I was talking to Governor Hochul, who is our governor here in New York, I would say it is crucial that she understands the urgency of providing childcare assistance. The development of our children, both cognitively and emotionally, is dependent on access to quality childcare. That childcare is a fundamental human right and should be treated as such. Furthermore, our children, our child care providers and our educators cannot continue to struggle to make ends meet while taking care of our children, and that the governor must prioritize funding child care in this year's state budget to ensure the well-being of our youth and the success of our economy.
Thank you. Who's next?
I would say Governor Walz, who has been a supporter of supporting childcare in the state of Minnesota, but I would say childcare is a failed market system. It has been held together by Band-Aids. And when I use the word crisis, I mean crisis. And if childcare is in crisis, families are hurting, children are hurting, teachers are hurting. And I strongly believe if we don't get a large influx of money in the short term for childcare, the infrastructure as it stands will fall apart. And there'll be reverberations of consequences across the state of Minnesota for this, in terms of the health and well-being of families and the health and well-being of children. And in Minnesota, we have the second largest racial achievement gap in the country. And if you follow the numbers to early childhood, it starts in early childhood. So funding early childhood is absolutely essential for the well-being of our future and for the well-being of children and families today.
Thank you, Celeste. I think that there's this notion that that we have time. I feel like there's this perception that, oh, you don't have to start in the early years. And maybe someone can respond to just the significance of birth through kindergarten. And you can respond as you answer this question of what you would say to the governor. Who wants to go next?
I could go. So, being a previous childcare provider and a mom, my children are 5 and 6. Those early ages are so fundamental in children developing their physical skills, cognitive skills, and most importantly for me is the social emotional skills. And I think those are skills that are cultivated within a childcare environment. We could do our best at home, but being out and socializing with children, we've seen, and I am still working through the impact of that lack of socialization during COVID. My children are in IEP because they did not have that interaction with other children and other people. So I just think it's important during these ages for children to have access to being in an environment that would nurture those early developmental skills.
Thank you, Alexis. Who's next? And you can either answer the question of, if you had a captive audience with the governor of your state or elected officials in your state, what might you say to them? Liliana, I think you were trying to jump in.
No, yeah, it was pretty much adding to what Alexis just shared. Here in Santa Clara County, we have a lot of our children super behind in school. They're not getting the resources they also need right now. They could be in elementary school. Their reading is super behind. And part of the problem is because some of them didn't even have the opportunity to attend preschool. And I have personally seen how much of a difference having your child at a daycare does, especially because both my 3-year-old and my 4-year-old are speech delay, and they're both COVID babies, and they had never seen any like teaching environment that they were learning. by a parent, it's so much different. I feel teaching your child and how they learn is different as well than when they're learning with someone else. And when they started their preschool class, they were both like, you couldn't understand what they're saying. Now they're speaking so much more. So I can definitely see a difference. And also with my daughter, she attended my oldest is 9. She attended preschool, and she was, so we're bilingual. We speak Spanish and English at home. So when they're going into kinder, a lot of parents don't understand that if you're bilingual, your kid, it's a test. And if they don't, and that test for kinders, it's just how well they speak English. And if they do not pass, they get placed in ELS classes, which is the English learning language or something. And she passed that test, and that was so much like due to the fact that she had early education access. But I seen it from my other friends that didn't have the opportunity to send them to preschool when they were her age, that they didn't pass that test, and now they're in 4th grade and they still haven't passed that test, and it's stressing out the child and the parents at the same time. So, and here in California, I feel our governor sometimes doesn't really pay so much attention to how much childcare has to influence it and everything that happens around us.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to weigh in on this question? Okay. Okay, if not, how does our audience remain connected with your organizations or your work? So if they wanted to follow you, how would they do that?
Say for my organization, Spaces in Action, you could follow us on Instagram. We are also on YouTube, where we post videos and content about what we focus on in our issue areas, because we all know we don't live a one-issue life. So Spaces in Action encaps childcare, healthcare, climate, and tax justice. So check out our platforms. We're also on Facebook as well.
Great. Who's next?
I can go. I am with Kids Count on Us. We're a Minnesota-based organizing group that works with providers, educators, and we're reaching out to parents more and more to organize and engage to create reform and change in the child care across the state. So if you Google Kids Count on Us, you'll find our webpage. We're on Facebook and we're on Instagram as well.
Great. What about 9 to 5? How can we stay connected with 9 to 5's work?
Thank you. So 9 to 5 is a member-based grassroots organization advancing economic justice for women and gender-expansive people of color to better living and working conditions. And you can see more information about us and stay up to date on our organizing work on Instagram, YouTube. We have a Blue Sky account as well, and our webpage at 9to5.org. We also are a member of the Georgia Infant and Toddler Coalition, convened by GEARS, the Georgia Early Education Alliance for Ready Students. And you can see the work that the coalition is doing on the webpage to see a full list of our partners in the state of Georgia.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah,
I can go.
Oh, right, you can go.
Go ahead.
Okay, you can go.
Sorry for the background. My kids are sick. They have a stomach bug. I'm so sorry. So
You don't have to apologize, Liliana.
We have an Instagram. We have a Facebook page. It's at Parent Voices California, and we also have our website, which is www.parentvoices.org. Yeah.
And your daughter's face is a reminder of like why we do this work. So it's so good to see them, because I know there's other little ones. Okay, Inoja.
Yes, so for you guys can follow Alliance for Quality Education on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky as well. We work alongside Citizen Action of New York, as well as Empire State Campaign for Childcare, which are like a coalition and partners that work or advocate, for increased funding for early childcare and education, promoting policies that support affordable and quality childcare for working families, and we push for comprehensive education reform that addresses the needs of all students. And so definitely be sure to follow us.
Great. Well, if there's no one else, I think that we will, no one else, right? Crystal?
Well, I wanted to plug in Maine People's Alliance. They do a lot of advocacy work here in Maine, and they're on all the socials you can think of. And then if you want to follow the YW in particular with their mission to eliminate racism and empower women, we have a Facebook, we have Instagram, we've got all of the stuff. And you can check our website at www.ywcamaine, which is spelled out MAINE.org.
Great. Celeste, were you trying to jump in?
No.
Okay. There's also the Early Childhood Funders YouTube, so you can check there. There's content. This will be posted there. But I want to thank you all for your time. Thank you for stepping away from your typical responsibilities in the evening and sharing your thoughts and your insights with us. And thank you for your clear call on what needs to happen as it relates to childcare. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.